fortunate enough to hear this presentation at conference in Chicago. And we're also fortunate enough that these are our members. And so we thought that this would be a great opportunity to share for anyone that wasn't able to attend and hear this, because it is, very applicable to the region. So with that, I'm going to kick off our announcements for other events. So September 21st is our annual business meeting, and we're going to be hosted by XL Construction at the Google Mass Timber Building, which is really exciting. So this will be an in-person, it'll be a tour. It should bring all our members out, and it's very timely because we need to make sure we have quorum at our annual business meeting for our incoming board. So very exciting that we'll have that. It does note here they were scheduled for completion August 22nd, 6 weeks earlier, and 3.6% less cost than steel. I know that they're on time because my son-in-law is doing the punch. So I hear all the time about what's getting finished up. So they will be ready by August.
This will definitely draw people out. My husband is in the background going, yeah, me, I want to go.
Oh, good. That's awesome. All right. So speaking of quorum and our 2023 Board of Directors slate and call for nominations, the board has put forward their slate for 2023, that being Brent McClure as Vice President-elect. Did I make that backwards? I did. Vice President.
Backwards.
Yes, that's backwards. Vice President, then President. Excuse me. Mary Morris will continue as our secretary based on this nomination. Madhu, and I'm going to attempt her last name. I am Perumal is on the slate as director. Afsha Ali also as a director, and Dasha Ortenberg as a director. So this is the slate that's being put forward. You'll see that in September. So make sure that
in addition to a treasurer to be confirmed, hopefully shortly.
Yes. So that will be that vote will be at the September business meeting. Women's Leadership Summit. It's been a long time coming. The end of September, the 28th through October 1st, AIA Silicon Valley is hosting the National Women's Leadership Conference. This is very exciting. We've got over 500 women architects coming to our town, and we've got lots of tours and a really great conference ahead planned for this. So you'll be hearing more. October 20th is our golf tournament. This is a save the date. We have our committee getting ready to kick off with the planning. And so it'll be same as last year. We'll be out at Shoreline. It was a really nice setup there with the after event. So we'll do the same thing this year. So love to see you out there. And with that, I'll hand it off to Leah Bayer, our AIA Silicon Valley chapter president.
Thank you, Chris. I will start with acknowledging our sustaining partners. First with Premier. Thank you to Earthbound Homes and Luso, Premier sponsors. Next, our gold sponsors, Block Construction, Bernardo Photography, Level 10 Construction, and ArchIT. Thank you. Thank you to silver sponsors, AWV presented by Grigg Systems, ZFA Structural Engineers, CETA, CAW, and Lionakis. And next, our call to take the lead. We have many exciting programs, as Chris mentioned, both this year and next year. In particular, we are looking for our next design award committee. So there are many committees looking for new leadership in committee members, a lot of opportunities to get involved and shape future programs. And so if you have any interest in getting involved in a committee or helping with one of our signature events, please reach out to Chris, Veronica, or myself and let me know. We've actually had quite a few members lately reaching out, which is really exciting. We'd love to see more of that continue. So either you, or maybe it's somebody at your firm that you think would benefit from an opportunity to take on leadership within the chapter. It's a really great space to grow. It also is a really great benefit to your firm to help grow leadership skills in your staff. So I highly recommend encouraging yourself or your staff members to participate. And with that, we'll jump into the program for this evening. This is our Wildfire Smoke Systems for Air Quality in Single Family Homes presentation by Dan Garber and Luke Morton. And as Chris said, I heard all about this from both Chris and Jennifer at a conference, and so I'm really excited for this presentation, and it is very timely given the time of year that we are approaching in the Bay Area in California. So first, Dan Garber, a little bit about Dan. If you don't know already, Dan's deep appreciation for architecture and design transcends styles and periods. An expert in researching and working in many architectural styles, he has vast knowledge of historic designs and details. Coupled with his aesthetic sensibilities, this insight has shaped his ability to adapt historic designs to modern standards so that each project is different and new. After earning his Bachelor of Architecture degree from Carnegie Mellon in 1979, he joined the renowned firm SOM in Chicago. And during his time there, he recognized the great need for organizational development and program management for his corporate and institutional clients. Dan's work serving Sun Microsystems when he was VP at Jones Lang LaSalle brought Garber family to Palo Alto in 1997. In his spare time, Dan assisted Catherine designing single-family homes, and Dan officially joined FGA in 2002, bringing with him strong management skills and a rich business history that helped grow the firm from 3 employees to 20 and keeps FGA running smoothly today. And our second speaker, Luke Morton, also from Furbis Garber Architects. I need to move my own slide. Luke's background includes positions with the U.S. Green Building Council in Washington, D.C., the Rocky Mountain Institute in Boulder, the South Face Energy Institute in Atlanta, and Varen Energy Services in Oakland. During that time, he was instrumental in supporting a carbon-based standard that will be incorporated into LEED criteria, evaluating the effectiveness of the smart thermostat, and serving as a HERS rater inspecting more than 500 new single-family houses for Energy Star and Earthcraft House certifications. He also led the energy audit of the entire community college district of San Mateo. Luke is a graduate of Stanford University, where he earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Earth Systems and Master of Science degree in Civil and Environmental Engineer. In his free time, he enjoys baking in his solar oven, playing the ukulele in a local bluegrass band, and lecturing about building science to Stanford undergraduates, and a little bit to us, hopefully, today. So with that, I will turn it over to Luke and Dan. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Leah. And by the way, it is Fergus Garber Group. Catherine founded the firm in 1987, and her maiden name is Fergus. And that's the Fergus and the Fergus Garber. So this was a presentation that Luke and I made, 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago now, I forget. So I'll just flip through a bunch of these slides that we don't need to spend too much time on. I will attempt to. There we go. The learning objectives: identify passive and active indoor air quality management strategies and systems for existing and new homes. Recommend being able to recommend air monitoring systems for occupants. Educating their homeowner clients on the uses and activities that support or exacerbate indoor air quality. And become knowledgeable of the efficiency and resiliency of employing indoor air quality management systems and strategies. Those were our learning objectives. And then we started here. This was an actual photograph of my house here in Palo Alto during the fire about a year ago. which turned everything a sickly yellow and red, depending on where you were. In any case, I'm Dan Garber of Fergus Garber Architects. Luke Morton is joining me. He's our sustainability manager. Our practice is focused on the single family home exclusively. Our work is located mostly in the Bay Area of California. In 35 years, none of the homes we have designed have been threatened by a wildfire. But in the last 3 years, nearly all of our homes have been impacted by the smoke that these wildfires produce. During this time, our current and new clients have begun to demand and expect that the houses we have designed and will design for them will also protect the quality of the air that's inside of them. Current California code does not address the impact of wildfire smoke on indoor air quality. The code does require houses to be constructed much more tightly than they were when construction was unregulated. The code actually demands that outside air be mechanically brought into the house to compensate for the air that was previously permeating the house's skin passively, regardless of the quality of the air outside. This seminar is the synopsis of the work that we have done to think through these issues to better meet our clients' expectations of protecting the quality of inside air. And we'll present a small project that we are using to test the efficacy of one solution. Learnings from that project will then be applied to our other larger projects. By way of introduction, we thought it would be helpful to do a quick review of the history of air quality to put into context the issues that we're dealing with, and then walk through the wildfire threat, the physics of air and its particles, code issues, some research that's been collected on indoor air quality, and all of that before sharing our test project with you, and then we'll end with questions and discussion. Air quality is fundamental to our health. That kind of seems obvious, doesn't it? It was knowledge that has been known at least since 400 BC, when Hippocrates made the Greeks and Romans aware that air in crowded cities and mines could be contaminated. In the 1830s, Chicago adopted the motto, "The city in a garden," which, by the way, because we were in Chicago, I started out with that quote. And Dr. John Rauch convinced the city to set aside 60 acres of the cemetery that was then fronting the lake to begin what is now Lincoln Park. Quoting here, "By the middle of the 19th century, promenading along the lakefront to breathe in the healthful lake air became a popular activity," unquote. Frederick Law Olmsted, well known as the father of American landscape architecture, also became convinced that fresh air was key to our health. It was his growing understanding of how to connect people to clean air that in part convinced New York City to hire him in 1857 to clean out the huge trash dump that eventually became Central Park. 4 years later, when Civil War broke out, President Lincoln signed the bill that created the United States Sanitary Commission, and it was Olmsted who was assigned to be the executive secretary of that commission. Synergistically, Louis Pasteur's groundbreaking work that resulted in germ theory was published that same year, 1861. While this would eventually give the science to why the quality of air we breathe is critical to our health, it took decades for the medical community to accept it. Cities were recognized as producers of bad air. Central Park became, as it was described, the lungs of the city. Carving into dirty cities to create clean and green parks was and still is considered a powerful way to counteract the effects of bad air. And not just cities. Olmsted's convictions helped him convince others to rethink the siting and design of hospitals, sanatoriums, other structures and landscapes as critical to sustaining the health of our country. When awarded the assignment to design the campus of Stanford University, his original plan was to spread the buildings out in the hills that are behind today's current campus. This way, the students and professors would benefit by the copious amounts of light and air that would be found at those higher elevations. But Mr. Stanford ultimately rejected Olmsted's recommendation and demanded that he revise his plans to the traditional academic quadrangles that he wanted his campus to emulate. Alas, I have been unable to find a sketch of Olmsted's original proposal. In the archives, this episode between the two men was politely referred to as the gentleman's disagreement and recorded only in letters. Despite the growing understanding, the quality of our air was not defined and regulated until the events that occurred in Donora, Pennsylvania. In 1948, 19 people died from air polluted by the particulates emitted from 2 US steel factories. In that small town, the Donora Zinc Works and the American Steel and Wire Company. Following the deadly smog, President Truman convened the first National Air Pollution Conference in 1950, and Congress passed the first Air Pollution Control Act in 1955. Coincidentally, my grandfather actually worked for U.S. Steel during that time, and he brought a second white shirt with him to work in the morning to change into at lunch when his shirt became so soiled it was no longer white. While Denora anchored the understanding that industry was the cause of polluted air, it wasn't recognized that there were other major contributors of pollution until Congress passed the Clean Air Act of 1970. And then President Nixon established the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, giving the agency broad responsibility for regulating pollution created by cars and other sources. The impact of these regulations on a country's health since then can be demonstrated in several EPA studies, including this one, that correlated the amount of lead in gasoline and the amount of lead found in our blood. Over a 4-year period from 1976 to 80, the levels of both were reduced by more than 50%. Now, it was a remarkable correlation and outcome. When outdoor air quality did become dangerous, the public was advised to stay indoors and keep their windows shut. The implicit assumption was that there is a clear separation between the indoor and the outdoor environments. Quoting from Mr. Sundell's 2004 paper on the history of indoor air quality and health, quote, "More than half the body's intake during a lifetime is air inhaled in the home. Thus," he felt, "most illnesses related to environmental exposures stem from indoor air exposure." For the most part, the legislation of clean air was focused nearly entirely on the outside and not the inside of our buildings and homes. It was and is axiomatic that the solution for bad air inside is to flush it out with good outside air. This is the assumption underlying California's current inside air regulations. However, the wildfires remind us that the complete separation of outside and inside cannot be assumed. Bad air can get inside even the most tight of homes. And while most of us are willing to make some changes to reduce the contaminants we bring into our homes, few of us are willing to make larger changes without regulations requiring them or our architects recommending them. So, how do we design the house to best manage the quality of air within it? Luke, would you please break down the problem we're dealing with?
Awesome. Okay,
and cue me and I'll just advance the slides.
Okay, sure. Next, we want to, are we on? Yeah, we're on the next slide. Sorry, let me get my screens organized because I was expecting to share.
Would it be more convenient if you took it?
No, this will be fine. I just reconfiguring. Yep. Okay, so the questions that confront us here for what I want to review are, number one, what are the threats to human health that come with wildfire smoke? So we'll talk for a minute about what wildfire smoke does to the human body and why we should be concerned about it. Secondly, what are the physics of the air and particulates that are suspended within the air that we need to understand to help us grasp the variety of solutions to wildfire smoke? And thirdly, how do current building codes interact with these threats? Next slide, please. Wildfires produce smoke that is made up of particulates, which includes soot, but a wide variety of other pollutants. Particulates are a type of air pollution. It's a broad category of air pollution, but it's a category of size, because the smaller the particle, the easier it is to enter into the bloodstream. Wildfire produce smoke particulates of a broad range of sizes, but this generally includes a substantial amount of particulates that are less than 10 microns and 2.5 microns. And as a reference, 2.5 microns is roughly 100 times smaller than the human hair. So the particulates that are smaller than 2.5 microns are considered especially dangerous, but PM10 is also considered dangerous as well, because they bypass many of our body's natural defenses. They can travel deep within the respiratory tract, reaching the lungs and directly entering the bloodstream. This is especially true the longer one is exposed to these particulates. So we're really concerned about chronic exposure for these traditionally. Studies have linked increases in daily exposure to 2.5 micron particulates to increased respiratory and cardiovascular hospital admissions, emergency department visits, and, well, death. Long-term exposure to fine particulates may be associated, but a strong correlation with chronic bronchitis, reduced lung function, asthma, increased mortality from lung cancer and heart disease. And this impacts especially the infirm, people with breathing and heart problems, as well as children and the elderly can be particularly sensitive. Next slide, please. This chart shows the air quality index for Sonoma County in California just last year. We're just commenting it's already wildfire season. Well, just last year, 2021, had a number of wildfire events that you probably remember. You can see the numbers largely vary throughout this chart from good to moderate. That's for most of the year. And then a few weeks, which we've zoomed in on and highlighted, that are unhealthy due to the wildfires in September and October up in Sonoma and Napa County. Next slide. Historically, the number of acres burned by wildfires has been increasing. This chart from the EPA shows the general upward and to the right trend of wildfires, of the acreage burned by wildfires since the year 1980 and up to the present day. So we're seeing that general trend, and if past is, if the future will be like the past, we can continue, expect to see this trend continue. Professor Marshall Burke at Stanford and his team of researchers have been compiling data on wildfire smoke exposures. This map shows two separate two-year snapshots of mean ambient wildfire smoke. This is exposures of 2.5 micron particulates. The yellow and orange areas show the intensity and extent of the smoke exposure. So this is, think of this as kind of a heat map for that exposure. And in particular, the pockets of particulates that we see from the years 2006 to 2008 are more isolated in those years. And then 10 years later, we're seeing much broader penetration or transmission of those particulates and an acute exposure of those particulates across the extending from the West Coast all the way through the Mountain West and into the Midwest. One little other data point from Professor Burke's research is that smoke is now responsible for half of the annual air pollution that people are exposed to in Northern California. So some might see that as a success for how good we've been in general on air quality, but now that wildfire smokes are really the predominant exposure in our region for a lot of air pollution, especially out in the rural areas. And this is becoming more prevalent across the country. More maps produced by Professor Burke and his team document the amount of particulates that accumulate inside of the home from wildfire smoke. So this shows the documents that not only is it ambient outside wildfire smoke that we're worried about, but that wildfire smoke is coming inside of homes. What is of particular interest in this study is Professor Burke and the data set that he had did not find any statistically significant correlation between air quality inside of homes and household income and air tightness of that home. And so we've been actually talking with him about some hypotheses around that, but we'll explore that soon here. Let's see. Okay, complicating issues here. So let's get a little bit more into the understanding the threats and the house as a system and where wildfire smokes are entering and presenting themselves, manifesting within that pre-existing system. The whole screen again, Dan.
All right.
Yeah, sorry, you're good. So the quality of indoor air is further complicated and degraded by particulates that are produced by combustion, as well as other sources inside of the home. Burning wood in the fireplace, burning gas or propane at a cooktop that is improperly vented to the outside are also sources of particulate matter. Additionally, the homeowner themselves will bring particulates into the house through their normal, typical, and daily use of the home. So we see that on the right, it's tracking in dust and pollen on shoes, as well as dust mites and mold on pets. We managed to get some data during an actual wildfire event from a friend who has a good air monitoring system as well as a good air filtration system. Let's see, Dan, I think this is the next slide, but I'm not seeing. There we go. There we go. And so this, again, zooming into one specific home. And we're looking at indoor air quality over the course of just a couple of days. This is that September event. This home happens to be in Mountain View. And, but there was a number of other wildfire events happening at that time. This particular house happens to be a passive house. So if you're familiar with the passive house standard, that is tested to be very airtight, less than 0.6 air changes per hour at a pressure difference of 50 pascals between inside and outside. A typical home, as a reference point, is roughly 5 to 6 air changes an hour at 50 pascals. So 10 times more tight. It is also equipped with a heat recovery ventilator system with a MERV 13 filter. For the purposes of this data, that HRV system, the heat recovery ventilator, is off. So we're not getting mechanically ventilated smoke into the home. Note the spikes on the corresponding with the activation of the clothes dryer and the bathroom fan. Let's see if I can turn my tools here. Great, thank you, Dan. When we have exhaust fans that induce infiltration in order to function, that infiltration is bringing smoky air into the house. So this is all to say that any management of indoor air quality must include these complicating factors of the ventilation needs of the occupants' use of the home as well. Okay, next slide. So now let's review a basic overview of some of the physics, just to get us refreshed on these ideas. As this will help structure any solution that we come up with to manage wildfire smoke. Smoke comes into our buildings through infiltration. Infiltration also requires an equal amount of exfiltration because our houses are always in pressure balance, or nearly always in pressure balance with the outside. For air to come into a house, the same amount of air has to exit the house, maybe in some other location. Infiltration and exfiltration occur when two conditions are met. First, there is an open airflow path between the inside and the outside. And second, there's an air pressure difference between those two sides. In this diagram, we have generically indicated the opening, an opening, but it could be a window, or it could be a crack around a non-weather strip door. But air does not really care one way or another. Next slide, please. So there are two main sources of natural pressure differences that we'll describe, just to remind ourselves. The first and perhaps most intuitive is wind. The second, we'll document it in the next slide, is stack effect. So for wind pressure differences, we see wind blowing on the windward side of the house, inducing a positive pressure difference relative to the inside on that side. And then infiltration will occur on that windward side. And on the leeward side, there's a relative negative pressure difference resulting in exfiltration. As you see from the slide, there is these wind and pressure dynamics can be very complex, and they're always dynamically changing. But wind and natural ventilation is the predominant source of natural ventilation for the home, or natural infiltration. Next, let's look at, next slide, please, Dan. Stack effect. Stack effect can be described as thermal buoyancy. Warmer air is pushing out of the top during the winter season, with cooler outside air coming in lower in the house. The reverse happens actually during the summertime cooling season, where cooler, more dense air is inducing a positive pressure at the bottom of the house, with hot air infiltration coming in at the top. And I did see a question. Dave, I'll get to your question maybe at the end. That's a good question. I think I want to get through this, and maybe it'll help answer some of your questions when I get through some other slides. Okay, I think we've got next slide, Dan.
Any moment now.
Yep.
Oh, I see. Sorry.
All good. So we've talked about passive or natural sources that generate pressure differences. Next, we're going to look at active or mechanical ventilation. Here are 3 typical examples of mechanical ventilation systems that actively move air from one place to another. Bathroom ventilation exhaust fans, kitchen hoods, and clothes dryers. Anytime these exhaust fans are running, makeup air will come through any opening available, including both unintentional leakage and intentional leakage, or intentional pathways through the exterior shell of the home. Okay, next slide. In recent years, building codes, including Title 24 in California, and so since we're all in California, we'll focus on that one, but also incorporated into the I codes, have incorporated a mandatory continuous ventilation systems into new homes. And in California, that also includes any new addition and any new ADU conversion of existing space. This follows a decade or more of these requirements being prerequisites for green building certification systems, such as LEED or Greenpoint rated, which is what we see in the Bay Area sometimes. The most common standard reference, and the one in force here in California, is ASHRAE 62.2. The typical approach for a house is to use one or more bathroom exhaust fans and run it continuously all day, every day, throughout the whole year, to induce fresh air infiltration in the home and dilute those indoor air pollutants. The next few slides, we'll see why this policy has been manifested, instantiated in code. I want to emphasize these ASHRAE standards do not mandate that homes have exhaust-based ventilation. They simply require continuous ventilation of some sort and are currently agnostic as to the approach. It's just when we talk to most project teams and builders, the exhaust fan for the bathrooms, you already have those exhaust fans in there. You might as well just wire them up to run 24/7. And so that's the least cost approach. Okay, this chart shows or compares the amount of 2.5 micron particulate matter that is in homes with and without continuous ventilation. So this is why we have ASHRAE 62.2 in the state. The further the data are to the right, the more particulate matter is in the home. Note, this isn't about outside wildfire smoke. This is about indoor or just other sources of particulates, whether brought in, imported into the home, or generated inside the home. The black line of triangles that we see further to the right shows homes that are without, they do not have a continuous ventilation system. The homes to the left in the blue circles indicate homes with this continuous mechanical ventilation system. And we see very clear signals here of it's better to have, at least for most of the year, when outdoor air is good, to have this mechanical ventilation system. There are similar kinds of data and results for variety of other indoor air contaminants, including volatile organic compounds, as well as formaldehyde, stuff that's off-gassing from our materials and our furniture, pretty much anything we bring into the home. Continuous ventilation systems are generally positive and a healthy thing to put into a home, so long as the outdoor air quality is good. And we need to next learn how to maybe adapt these mechanical ventilation systems. So let's summarize our learnings thus far. Outside particulates enter the home because of pressure differentials, which drive infiltration and exfiltration through 3 types of pathways. We have intentional openings, such as vents and hoods, controlled openings such as windows and doors, and uncontrolled openings, which are just accidental holes in the and air pathways in the building assemblies. There's a mantra in the building science world, which I'm sure many of us have already heard: build tight and ventilate right. Building tight seems obvious enough, both from the perspective of energy efficiency and comfort, but also in this additional framework, smoke infiltration. If we build tight, next slide, Dan. Yeah, there we go. If we build tight, we can substantially reduce the amount of infiltration from wind and stack effect pressure differences. And to be clear, we don't think we can build perfectly airtight submarines of homes, but we can sure do a lot better in our construction practices. The least we can do to manage smoke infiltration is reduce unintentional openings to any practical extent. Next slide. Yeah, if we ventilate right, we can substantially reduce the various sources of air pollution inside the home that we need to exhaust or to evacuate to the outside. Consequently, it is important to think about how to provide makeup air from intentional openings as opposed to unintentional ones. So in theory, we can maybe control the quality of that incoming makeup air. Next, we need to find ways to compensate for limitations of current building code or common practices to accommodate the current building code to manage these episodic smoke events. The typical exhaust fan approach to managing indoor air quality will likely have deleterious results on smoke infiltration if not deactivated. Okay, next, Dan, this is you, I think.
Let me introduce the test house that's under construction as we speak. This is the first project that began our research and development of how we deal with wildfire smoke that we started about 2 years ago. And the assignment was to design a small house that a recently retired couple asked us to design in Novato, California, so they could be close to their grandchildren. Novato, as all of you know, is about 40 miles north of San Francisco at the top of the bay. The clients for this project were particularly concerned about their health, given the location at the bottom of the Napa-Sonoma wildfire smoke channels. Additionally, the site is up against the hills and is itself under direct threat of wildfires in the wildland-urban interface area. The house is a new 1,200 square foot ADU on a 13-acre rural site and is designed to complement the existing 100-year-old farmhouse that is on the property and occupied by one of the client's children and their grandchildren. So let's talk through the strategies and solutions that we developed for the test house, its passive and active systems, and the owner-occupant operation of the house. And Luke, I think, is this you or is this me? Oh, it's me, sorry. So the passive strategies, a tight house. Key to our passive air quality strategy is that the building needs to be tight. To make the house airtight in a cost-effective way, we employ many of the guidelines and construction techniques that are found in the passive house certification system, including performing a blower door test to benchmark the airtightness of the home during construction to achieve a maximum of 1 air change per hour at 50 pascals. The passive strategies, eliminating or reducing indoor combustion, are addressed by the house being an all-electric house and eliminating the standard types of internal combustion. No gas water heaters, no gas stoves or ovens, no gas dryers, and no fireplaces. The passive strategies, these really rely on the homeowner. The wide porches around the house add to its utility, allowing for the overflow of interior activities onto protected outdoor areas, making the small house feel larger than it actually is. The covered porches also protect the walking surfaces from airborne detritus, like pollen and leaves to some degree. The paving provides walk-off space between the homeowners as they enter the house, and it creates a relatively protected space to locate controlled air pathways into the house. Further, the house's entry is smaller and compartmentalized from the living spaces in another effort to keep the outside airborne particulates from entering the parts of the house that the occupants spend more time in, the gathering and resting areas. Okay, Luke, take us through the active strategies.
All right, so filtering the smoke out of the air is the solution to manage the indoor air quality during these wildfire events. What are the pros and cons of various ways to accomplish this? Can we combine different systems to develop solutions that address the circumstance being solved for? So here are the systems that we evaluated with the client. The first option is room fans with Hepa filters. So this is deploying, going to a box retail store or ordering it online, just a recirculating Hepa filter that you plug into the wall and filter the air out and filter the particulates out. So during a wildfire smoke event, this would be operated by closing up the house, turning off any and all exhaust fans, and sheltering in the house in a more dormant state. And this would be effective in a practical short-term way to manage a smoke event. Smoke will still infiltrate, but the room-by-room HEPA filters will help keep those concentrations of particulates down. There are several downsides, of course, to this approach. It is important for the occupants to resist compounding the particulate problem during smoke events by inducing infiltration through their household activities. In particular, with cooking, turning on any that exhaust fan over the kitchen, over the cooktop, and doing laundry, which is another exhaust fan. By not allowing air to circulate from the outside, fresh air to come back in, the indoor air contaminants may steadily creep up over time. That is off-gassing from finishes and furnitures. And this may over time result in compromised indoor air quality. For good filtration, room HEPA fans need to be to cycle through a lot of air. And this means they're running typically on high speed and they get noisy. So there's an acoustic problem there. And the room fans are not sort of a long or lasting or permanent solution. They don't have the life of a dedicated system. And so lastly, they don't impact the infiltration of particulates through uncontrolled openings in the house. They simply collect whatever particulates inevitably enter. So our next idea was a HEPA, an HVAC system, and incorporating HEPA filtration into the HVAC system. So this would be an improvement on just the room-by-room HEPA filters, and it should address some of the noise issues, in particular because we have an air handler that's down in, say, the crawl space, and the constantly recirculating air. There's a lot of acoustic lining in that duct work that's circulating all throughout the house. And so it seems like a more permanent and sustainable solution there, but it won't really address the other concerns we have. That is that we're still not getting fresh outside air to dilute any indoor contaminants, and it doesn't really manage the infiltration. Thirdly, we can think about having an HRV system, integrating a HEPA filtration system into a balanced heat recovery ventilator system that is designed to bring in fresh air from the outside. It'll super filter it, wring out most of those particulates, and provide that fresh air. And that checks the fresh air box, as well as is quiet and has a long life. But it still doesn't manage the infiltration from passive natural ventilation sources from wind and stack effect. So the last idea is having a supplemental supply air system, which we'll get into a little bit more detail in a minute, but it's essentially a supply air fan that is pushing in or drawing fresh air from the outside, pushing it into the house and super filtering it. And the result would be a slightly pressurized home relative to the outside. So all you're getting is exfiltration out of the indoor air going outward, and that indoor air is scrubbed of smoke particulates. So the solution we came up with for the clients in Novato was actually kind of all the last three. So we'll get into those details here. The house will be, next slide, thank you, Dan. The house will be equipped with a typical HVAC system, including standard kitchen hoods, bathroom fans, and a clothes dryer, an electric clothes dryer, but it's still a traditional exhaust fan based clothes dryer, not a condensing one. The home's heating and cooling will be provided through a multi-split heat pump system, where one outdoor unit is connected to 2 separate indoor ducted air handlers. Air filters will be integrated into these air handlers so they can filter out and clean the recirculated air. For this project, we're looking at a Mitsubishi Pumi system and at least MERV 13 filtration on the air handlers, though we're talking about the implications and cost implications of doing Hepa, and they can be, or maybe higher levels than MERV 13. The kitchen hoods, bathroom fans, and clothes dryers will all exhaust through vent chimneys on the roof. So secondly, the code required ASHRAE 62.2 ventilation of fresh air will come from a heat recovery ventilator, first and foremost. And that is providing continuous, efficient ventilation for much of the year when outdoor air is good. The intake is taken from high up on the wall under the protecting patio roof. Thank you, Dan. The conditioned outside air is then being, or the sort of tempered outside air is then being delivered into the supply ducts or into the ductwork of the heat pump system. And so we're piggybacking on those heating and cooling ducts to kind of to move that fresh air around the house. HEPA filters have also been specified on the supply side of the HRV. We're hoping we can get good levels of filtration there. Again, we'll see what the cost implications there will be. Next, we have a supplemental supply air system. So the HRVs with HEPA filters, if we get that high filtration, we'll be able to provide filtered fresh air to the home. However, they will not prevent smoke from entering the house through natural and induced infiltration during a wildfire event, because HRVs, by their nature, are balanced ventilation. So they're designed not to induce any pressure difference between inside and outside. So to deal with that natural and induced infiltration, we're looking at the supply HEPA fan that will slightly pressurize the house to keep smoke from entering into the house through those uncontrolled air passageways, and better support the occupants' use of the home during these events, wildfire events, as they enter and exit the house. It should, in theory, effectively eliminate any smoke infiltration from those unintentional openings by overwhelming any kind of natural pressure gradient and just resulting in all exfiltration at those leakage points. During its operation, we'll be pressurizing the house with the filtered outside air, and the building will therefore be continuously leaking air. Next slide, please. HRV systems not designed to add pressure to the home, so they're just designed to trickle fresh air into the home and operate continuously and quietly, along with an equal amount of stale air exhaust. When there is a wildfire event, the HRV system in the house will be shut down, or we intend it to be shut down, and we've advised the client accordingly. And then this HEPA supply fan will be turned on. So you can see the control systems, the control units on the left. The idea is to make the controls readily and easily accessible, whether it's through a wall switch and an iPhone app. So the idea with the HRV and supply airs, they're really complementary systems. They're not really intended to operate simultaneously. The HEPA fan system will supply air necessarily unbalanced. So we wouldn't want to use it throughout the course of the year, for most of the year when the outdoor air is good, because it's really much less energy efficient. We can't do any heat recovery on unbalanced air. So we also haven't found a smart unit on the market yet that would automate the switch over between HRV and HEPA supply fan. But we're still looking around for that. We're also a little bit suspicious of some. There are some solutions out there that are available more in the commercial market. Sometimes more controls on a house are harder to commission and to really set up for long-term operation without trouble. So, and furthermore, we've encouraged the homeowner to be more engaged with the indoor environment. So that's why we also have indicated here outdoor and indoor air monitors. So they can actively monitor the condition of their air and feel like they're more present in control of their environment, as opposed to some automagic process in the background. Lastly, the supply, important part about having some sort of manual control is we'd also like the supply air Hepa unit to be able to be easily modulated up to supply makeup air to compensate for exhaust air from mechanical exhaust air from the homes, such as from laundry or kitchen activities. So if they're running in the laundry, they might turn that Hepa supply fan up to high speed to compensate, to provide dedicated makeup air temporarily at high speed for that process, for that activity. Same thing for the kitchen or the bathrooms. And for this house, we have been using, we've specified a Pure Air Systems 600 HS plus variable speed Hepa supply fan, though there are some other units on the market, of course. And lastly, because you can't control what you don't measure, thank you, Peter Drucker, we have this outdoor and indoor monitoring system. All right, and for this house, we're looking at using a purple air system. And it could be that the monitoring system will also monitor non-wildfire smoke events, such as, wintertime, there's an inversion layer there in the valley, and there's a lot of fires in people's homes, sort of burning wood, also impacting the air quality. So this would just give real-time measurable data to the occupants to really manage their home, and so they can engage the systems that they need to when they want. Or that's our paradigm here. Okay, lastly, wrapping up, a synopsis. Passive and active strategies combined with an owner who is motivated to use and operate their house to manage the indoor air quality is the strategy we're proposing here. The efficacy of this approach will go into testing mode when this project is completed later this year and the homeowner moves in. The data from this house will be shared with the Stanford team we mentioned before, Professor Burke and his researchers, as well as a number of other faculty. Additionally, we are doing other research. We're thinking about doing some other research with the professor to place indoor and outdoor monitoring devices into a portfolio of our past projects to better understand and model the active performance of the house and the occupants over time, and in finer granularity and detail. So help them create a behavioral model of, why is, in particular, maybe to answer the question, why is wildfire smoke entering in otherwise really tight homes? What's going on there? Give some data to document that maybe it is in fact induced infiltration from mechanical ventilation. While this research hasn't yet been formally designed, we would love to come back here some future date and with some results on these other ventilation and filtration options and provide insight to what's necessary and sufficient to managing this problem. Okay, discussion and questions. Okay, we've got actually a poll here in front of you that you should see. Have you had clients that are concerned about wildfire smoke?
If you don't see the poll, make sure that you look at the bottom of your screen. You might have to click on it over in the More section.
Kristen, you'll share with us the results of that?
I'm going to
or Leah or whomever.
Veronica should
Veronica.
have the poll
Yeah, I think so far we have 19 of 21 who've answered the question.
Good. Good.
Go ahead and end the poll. So right now it looks like it's 53%. Basically 10 people said yes and 9 people said no, which is 47%.
All right, there it is. Cool.
All right, and then we'll do the next question.
So as you're working on the poll, when we presented this in Chicago, we were not sure. The group was about 75 people. We figured that we probably wouldn't be the experts in the room, given that there were people coming from all over the country. As it turned out, we found out that I guess we were. I'm not sure what that really means, but it turns out one of the people that was in there actually had lived through a wildfire in Sonoma. His house was the last one standing on the block, and he had been actively looking at different ways to deal with smoke as well as fire in there. There's another woman from Alaska who complained, much to our surprise, that, well, you would think that Alaska would have among the freshest air that you could find in America, that because of the various environments, the cold, et cetera, the inversions are very common, and smoke, whether it's from wildfires or from just people burning fires, makes their air very bad. And so they have been struggling with this question. And then a very enthusiastic person from Montana who had been actively working on this for a while. Afterwards, I fielded a number of questions from other architects, and 2 building scientists, of course, cornered Luke, and 1 engineer from Mitsubishi cornered him, which I'm glad, because I didn't have to answer those questions. In any case, we'd be interested in what questions or thoughts, discussions you might have for those of you that have now sat through this whole thing.
Just want to jump in and say thank you for this great presentation. And you had offered to come back and present the results, and I would love to see that as a follow-up when you do have that.
Yeah, we got it. It's on the to-do list.
Kristen, how do you handle questions to chat, or just does somebody raise their hand?
Yep, I'm looking at chat. So if anyone wants to pose a question and doesn't want to ask it in person. All right, I see Dave's iPad Pro, Dave Edwards.
Yep. Go. Hey, Dave.
What would you like to ask?
Oh, I thought that was you.
I was wondering if Luke would like since you said Dave, he's like, oh yeah, Dave.
Nah, well, there are a lot of Daves out there, but
Okay.
Yeah.
Only one Dave Edwards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Professor.
Question, I actually have several questions.
Yeah.
Did you, when you guys decided to put in the filtered kind of pressure air, was there a component of your discussion that you had about tightening the house to reduce the kind of amount of energy and velocity you would have to put into the house?
Yes. Yeah. So we're looking at, I mean, we're not the builder, but we definitely trying to nudge that as much as we can to make it as tight as reasonable, to include a blower door score. So that blower door, for everyone else, is the apparatus we use to test for air tightness in a home.
And that's still being built, so you haven't done that yet? Is that correct?
Yeah, correct.
It's under construction. The foundation's just been finished. Framing start.
Okay. I have 2 other questions if it would be okay.
Sure.
Sure.
Okay. So you mentioned the purple air as your air monitoring system. Can you tell me a little bit more about how you guys decided on the purple air? Because I've never heard of it before, but I brought it up and it looks pretty interesting and pretty cheap too. So
that's why we were interested in it.
Yeah.
It's fairly ubiquitous around the country. It's, I don't know if there is like a standard or a benchmark, but it's sort of like it's the one that everyone refers to, I think, primarily because it's inexpensive and because it's all recorded, and it can be shared or not shared depending on, who buys it. So consequently, the Stanford group that Luke's been working with uses their data, not exclusively, but a lot of it.
Right.
And is it just PM 2.5, or is it tracking like CO and CO2 and PM 10 and anything else, or were you just looking at PM 2.5?
That's a good question. I am trying to remember. I have to look back up on the specs. It doesn't track VOCs as an example, because that's, obviously chemically. Yeah. But because I think it's a little laser thing, so it's just.
Oh, is it?
I think that's how it works. Anyway, I'm getting into in the weeds. But it'll track particulates, and it's one of those, it gives a signal, a reasonable signal. And I think there are CO2 versions of it, but they are a little bit more expensive. I would need to actually bring up the website. Mostly what we're inspired by is, again, what Dan just said. It's commonly available. They're kind of consumer oriented, well supported, and they're good enough for, I think, the purposes we're looking at.
And were you guys thinking about installing, like just having one on the exterior and one on the interior, or were you thinking based on your stack effect and kind of all of the other effects of differential pressure of determining different locations within the house? Or are you kind of assuming it's all kind of uniform?
I think, but we haven't gotten into the exact locations of it yet, but I think one for the bedroom wing and one for the living kitchen wing. So just there's a natural layout there.
I don't know if you had gotten on in time, Dave, but what we're planning on doing with the group at Stanford is identifying a subset of our actually active houses, including our passive houses and our lead platinum houses, and installing monitors both inside and out, because we have we have this sort of living library of a laboratory of different exterior details, whether it's wood, et cetera. And we've got a bunch of different conditions that we can sort of test real time. And so that we're going to end up doing this work with them over the next sort of year or so. I actually invited the woman that had approached us after the presentation in Chicago from Montana, because we could use some of their data if they're willing to participate as well. So they're very anxious because they're always looking for places to get data.
Yeah. And as an addendum to that, I know the Stanford group, they're interested in the primary bedroom area and the kitchen. Those are the main focus points. If they were to get 2 points inside the home where they'd want to get data, is one where you're sleeping. So that's kind of chronic exposure. But then in the kitchen, because that might capture, of course, some infiltration, but also in some combustion. If there's combustion appliances in the home, that's where it's going to most likely show up.
Okay. And then last question, and I appreciate it. The graph you showed of the particulates in the passive house, responsive to the clothes dryer and what was the water heater, I'm assuming?
The bathroom exhaust fan.
Okay. So you said that was active, replacement air. Is that correct? Or is that infiltration, passive infiltration?
It's induced infiltration. So that clothes dryer is just sucking a bunch of air out of the home. Where's that makeup air coming from? It's coming from infiltration.
Okay, so they didn't put up a balance, like a filtration active balance damper associated with that. So that's just that's just passive. Okay,
that's just yeah. So I wasn't sure what the nature of the question there, or whether what you were getting at, but yeah, no, that's how most of those systems work. I mean, unless you have a supply fan that's modulating up and down, that's how our houses work.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much, guys. That was great. Great presentation.
Anyone else?
So I have a question, and I'm not an architect.
Bless your heart.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask as a homeowner. So I purchased a home recently, and in the home inspection, in the AC unit up in the attic of my master bedroom, they noted that there was an electronic air cleaner and that it had been disconnected, and that the assumption was that's because they get noisy when the filters aren't changed out. The owners were elderly, so I don't know if maybe they just didn't keep up on it, but what good is that doing me? And is that something I should reconnect? And what's the value there?
Oh, I'll let you take that one, Luke. Luck with that.
I meant to climb up in the attic today to tell you what it's called or what it is, but that's all I know is they said it's an electronic air cleaner.
Yeah, I don't have I have a shallow knowledge of the history of those units. But the basic idea of those units is that you can electrostatically charge, the air runs past and the particulates kind of get electrostatically charged, and then you can attract them and capture them on these plates. That's my understanding of them. They can also help the particulates kind of, and I've heard other people explain, actually accrete on themselves, get bigger, so then filters can capture them better. In terms of the data on that stuff, I have to plead a little ignorance. That's why our focus, I think they can, I see it's reasonable that they can work to filter out the air, but you really need to get the air velocities going through that unit to be slow enough so that there's enough time for those particulates to really get attracted to the plate. But at the end, a filter is a filter. Like a good filter should be able to do most of the work for you, and should be sufficient. So that's why the emphasis has been on that end.
Yeah, we can measure the effect of the filter. The electrostatic cleaners, we don't have a lot of data on. However, some other things to think about there, if that is a old model, meaning if that electrostatic cleaner was, I don't know exactly the data is, more than 5, 7, 10 years old. The old models apparently produced ozone, which is not good for people or environment. And that might have been one of the other reasons why it was shut down. The newer models supposedly don't. Actually, at the beginning of the the fires that we had 2 years ago, I went ahead and installed a new one of the new Aero ones into my home to test it out, but I don't have any data for you yet to know whether it works or not. So it could have been that it was loud, that it didn't work, or that it was creating ozone. Hard to know.
Okay. Does the purple air unit, does it check for ozone? Does it record?
I do not believe so.
Okay.
It is just checking for particulates.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I have a question. Stephanie Silkwood, I'm listening mostly from a commercial perspective, but really fascinated with all this information because it's so hot on our minds all the time right now. And we have commercial clients who are concerned about fire smoke and their impacts, and especially with things, commercial projects going to more natural ventilation strategies. So I'm curious if there's any tips you have for commercial applications also, or is it pretty much translate similarly to commercial applications?
Commercial, you're looking at the word term of art is DOAS, DOAS, because in commercial applications you have much higher fresh air requirements. And there are a variety of ways that those are met, but the sort of best in practice is a dedicated outdoor air system, which is the new kind of efficient kid on the block in those
Makes sense.
in that world. But yeah, it is a significantly different kind of boxes and approach. And the physics are all the same in general, but for commercial projects, the code requirements are significantly different. And also the airflow and quantities for these much larger spaces. Yeah, we're not talking about like a little Hepa, a Hepa fan and HRV. It's, much more substantial systems that get integrated into, fancy commercial systems like VOV systems or whatever else you have.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It's great.
Thank you.
I'll jump in. Dan and Luke, thank you very much again. Also, nice presentation. Appreciate the history also up front. Interested in some of that data. Couple questions, I guess maybe more at the test house you noted. One is, it's pretty heavy mechanical systems for a small footprint. And, you're saying all electric. So I didn't hear you say, or just can you confirm, was there solar to offset that, or what's the thought there?
Yeah, solar is required generally, but this house will have a substantial solar PV array.
Yeah, it won't calc out to be probably perfectly passive, but it will get close.
Yeah. And then the design of the house you mentioned, the two kind of quadrants, is it zoned that you could turn the systems on and off, so at nighttime it could be running or daytime in the different areas?
Yeah, the HVAC system, we have those two air handlers running so that they can operate the bedroom zone separate from the kitchen living zone. Another idea I was just going to mention, just because it somehow came to mind, we have had ideas of clients using these Hepa supply fans sort of in lieu of, in larger homes, but in lieu of opening windows for nighttime ventilation for cooling out the house, sort of a slow whole house fan that's super filtered. You're supplying fresh unconditioned air from the outside. There's maybe in the summertime, like now, that would be add comfort. You'd cool down the mass of the home and not bring in a bunch of dust that way. So another idea that we've heard, using these same systems.
And maybe 1/3. Sorry, go ahead, Dan.
No, I was just going to say, it is a lot of equipment, but interestingly, the only thing that is truly being added is the supplemental air fan.
Yeah.
Because the HRV is required by code. Well, unless we wanted to use the
exhaust fan.
Exhaust fans from the toilet rooms. And whether you're using mini splits, or a central air, all that equipment's already there.
Yeah.
And interestingly, this supplemental air system, or that fan, not all that expensive, a couple more $1,000 bucks, but it's pretty straightforward. All of which we are pleased to learn, but once we finally got there, I'd say the real motivator in all of this were the clients, who are now in their late 60s, so they're my age.
Yeah.
They're concerned. If you go back to that map that we had, they were very cognizant of, wrong way, of being, sort of in these two channels, which is where the smoke comes whenever there's a fire anywhere up here. And their house is basically right in the center of all that.
Then one final, thought is, I don't know when you were designing this house or the others, but during the COVID period when we're all locked in the house, I remember running around turning the fans on, all the air and everything else, and then we had the fires come at the same time.
Right.
Were your clients talking about that as well, the health issues or benefits of?
The answer is yes. These two things were actually coupled. Our proposal to, when we submitted this paper over a year ago now, we ended up saying, let's just focus on the wildfires. But the answer is yes. And we're installing these systems now pretty regularly in all the houses that we do, not just because of wildfire, but also because people are now that much more aware of the pandemic and what it means to actually try and stay in a house for a year.
Yeah.
And have control over that inside environment.
Another sort of a thought related to this, but I'm thinking more about this HEPA supply fan and the cost question, I've just now remembered that I originally got the idea of the pure air systems that particular company because I bought one I lived in an ADU that was about 600 square feet. It happened to be 100 feet from a major freeway. So I was getting lots of like just diesel soot on my windowsill. And at the time, anyway, it was clearly not good air. So, and it was a rental. So I bought this thing at the time, it was about $1,000. And I hooked it up, just ducted it up to a window. So I hung it outside and weatherproofed it.
As a reminder, Luke's not an architect.
Yeah. No, and it was hidden by a nice little bird of paradise plant. But it was really amazing. I really felt a difference in the amount of just the fresh air being introduced to the home. I'm now realizing I took advantage of that nighttime cooling. It was accessible enough that I could it didn't have the automatic controls, but I, went outside, turned it on high and then turned it down low, when it was hot outside or whatever. But I think I would like to think that these systems are something like it could be in a case-by-case basis retrofittable, and not really exotic, unique systems for, huge expensive homes.